Leila Tran adjusted, her wheelchair's positioning for the third time that morning as she navigated through the crowded hallway of Cypress Ridge High. At 16, she had perfected the art of making herself invisible, keeping her eyes down and her movements deliberate to avoid drawing attention to the features that seemed to invite commentary from her classmates. Her thick-rimmed glasses perpetually slid down her nose, and her long black hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed nothing of the strength hidden beneath her oversized cardigan. Most students saw exactly what the bullies wanted them to see: a quiet, disabled girl who spoke in barely audible whispers when forced to participate in class discussions. What they didn't see were the calloused palms hidden beneath her sleeves, the powerful shoulders concealed by layers of fabric, or the way her dark eyes occasionally flashed with something that had nothing to do with fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Just make it through today, she thought, clutching her worn backpack closer to her chest. Just get to graduation without any more drama. But drama seemed to follow her regardless of her efforts to avoid it. Well, 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 came the familiar voice that made Leila's stomach clench with dread. Look what rolled into our hallway this morning. Savannah Knox stood near the main entrance like a predator waiting for prey, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning light streaming through the windows. At 17, Savannah had already perfected the art of cruelty disguised as casual observation, and she wielded her social status like a weapon against anyone she deemed beneath her notice. Flanking Savannah were her two constant companions: Chloe Vance, a brunette whose nervous laugh punctuated every cruel comment, and Riley Torres, whose athletic build made him the perfect enforcer when Savannah's psychological warfare needed physical backup. "Did you see what she's wearing today?" Chloe whispered loudly enough for half the hallway to hear. "Is that the same cardigan she wore yesterday? And the day before?" "She probably can't afford new clothes," Riley added with fake sympathy. "Poor thing. Maybe if she spent less time feeling sorry for herself and more time trying to fit in, she wouldn't look like such a disaster." Leila felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck, but she kept moving, hoping to reach her locker before the situation escalated. She had learned over the past 2 years at Cypress Ridge that engaging with Savannah only made things worse. "Don't react," she told herself. "Don't give them what they want." But Savannah wasn't finished. She never was. "Hey, Leila," Savannah called out, using her name like it was something distasteful. "I'm talking to you." Leila stopped reluctantly, her shoulders tensing as she turned to face her tormentors. Around them, other students slowed their pace, sensing the familiar dynamic about to play out. Some looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Others pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. "There are those gorgeous eyes," Savannah said with mock sweetness. "Behind those ridiculous glasses, of course. Has anyone ever told you that you'd be almost normal if you just tried a little harder? You know, made an effort? Leave me alone." "Savannah," Leila said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the buzz of hallway conversation. "Oh, she speaks." Chloe laughed, the sound sharp and unpleasant. "I was starting to think you were mute. Maybe you should be. Would save us all from having to listen to that weird accent when you do talk." The comment stung. Leila's family had moved to the United States from Vietnam when she was 8, and despite years of practice, she still sometimes struggled with certain sounds and phrases. It was another thing that made her different, another target for Savannah's cruelty. "My accent is fine," Leila said, immediately hating how defensive she sounded. "Is it though?" Savannah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the hallway. "Because every time you open your mouth, you sound like you just stepped off the boat from whatever backwards country you came from." "Don't let them see you cry," Leila thought desperately. Don't give them the satisfaction. But the tears were already burning behind her eyes, and she knew that if she stayed much longer, she would break down completely in front of half the school. She turned to wheel away, but Savannah's voice followed her. "That's right, roll away," Savannah called. "Run just like you always do. Maybe if you spent less time running and more time trying to be normal, people might actually want to be around you." The laughter that followed Leila down the hallway felt like physical blows. She could hear Savannah's voice continuing the commentary, describing her appearance in increasingly creative and cruel ways, and she knew that by lunchtime, everyone in school would have heard about the morning's entertainment. What none of them knew was that Leila Tran had been spending plenty of time training, just not the kind of training they would expect. For the past 3 years, ever since the bullying had started at her previous school, Leila had been working with her father, Marcus Tran, a retired Special Forces operative who had been forced to become a single parent after his wife's death. The bullying had been escalating for weeks. What started as whispered comments and social exclusion had grown into public humiliation and casual cruelty. Savannah seemed to take particular pleasure in timing her attacks for maximum audience impact, and today was no different. After school, as Leila made her way through the nearly empty hallway toward the accessible exit, she found her path blocked. Savannah stood at the top of the short flight of stairs that led to the main doors, flanked by Chloe and Riley. "Going somewhere, Leila?" Savannah asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "You look upset. Did something happen today?" Leila's hands tightened on her wheelchair's rims. The hallway was mostly empty now, with only a few students lingering by their lockers. She could feel the familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach, but something else was there too, a cold, calculating awareness that her father had trained into her. Assess the situation. She could hear Marcus's voice in her head. "Count your opponents. Know your exits. Stay calm. I just want to go home," Leila said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Oh, but we're not done talking yet," Savannah said, taking a step closer. "You see, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning, and I realized something. You never actually answered my question about trying harder." Chloe had her phone out, recording. Riley looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. "I don't want to talk," Leila said firmly. "Please move." "Please move," Savannah mimicked in an exaggerated accent. "See, there it is again, that weird little voice. Do you practice talking like that, or does it just come naturally?" Leila tried to wheel around them, but Riley stepped to the side, blocking her path to the alternate exit. The movement was casual, but effective. She was trapped. "You know what I think?" Savannah continued, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "I think you like being different. I think you like the attention. Poor little disabled girl, everyone has to be nice to her. Everyone has to make special accommodations." "That's not true," Leila said, her voice rising slightly. "Isn't it?" Savannah was directly in front of her now, close enough that Leila could smell her expensive perfume. "You roll around here like you own the place, like everyone should feel sorry for you. But you know what? Nobody cares about your sob story." "Back off, Savannah," Leila said, and for the first time, there was something in her voice that made the older girl pause, but it was too late. The dynamic had shifted, and Savannah could feel her audience watching. She couldn't back down now. "Or?" "What?" Savannah sneered. "What are you going to do? Run me over with your little wheelchair?" She reached out and grabbed the handles of Leila's wheelchair, giving it a sharp push backward. Leila's hands shot out to the rims, stopping the motion. But the action sent a clear message. "Don't touch my chair," Leila said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Don't touch my chair," Savannah repeated mockingly. "What if I do? What if I do this?" She shoved the wheelchair again, harder this time. Leila's training kicked in. She could have easily maneuvered out of the grip, could have used techniques her father had taught her to defend herself. But Marcus's voice echoed in her head. Fighting is for survival, not for school. You are better than those children who hurt you with words. So she endured. She absorbed the shove, the laughter, the humiliation. She kept her promise to her father. Even as Savannah's pushes grew more aggressive, even as Riley joined in, even as Chloe kept recording. Look at her just sitting there, Savannah said, emboldened by Leila's lack of response. She won't even fight back. She's pathetic. One final shove, meant to send Leila rolling backward down the short flight of stairs. In that moment, as she felt herself tipping, as she heard Chloe's delighted squeal and saw Riley's shocked expression, Leila made a decision that would change everything. She let herself fall. The video was online within an hour. Chloe had uploaded it to every social media platform she could think of, captioning it, "Wheelchair Girl Takes a Tumble. #Cypress Ridge High. #Karma." By the time Leila made it home, nursing a bruised elbow and scraped palms, the clip had already been shared hundreds of times. Students were commenting, laughing, adding their own cruel observations about her appearance and her fall. But something unexpected happened. The video kept spreading beyond the insular world of Cypress Ridge High. Parents saw it. Community members saw it. Local news picked it up. And they weren't laughing. The comment section became a battleground. For every cruel joke, there were 10 messages of outrage. People began identifying the school, demanding action, calling for consequences. The hashtag Justice for Leila began trending. Leila stayed home the next day, claiming she was sick. Marcus found her in her room, staring at her laptop screen with an expression he recognized from his own military days. The look of someone processing trauma and calculating their next move. "Show me," he said simply. Leila played the video without comment. Marcus watched in silence, his face growing darker with each passing second. When it ended, he was quiet for a long moment. "You could have stopped this," he said finally. "I've taught you how." "You told me never to fight in school," Leila replied. "You said I was better than that." "I was wrong," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of years of military experience. "Sometimes the enemy doesn't give you a choice. Sometimes you have to fight back, not because you want to, but because someone has to." He pulled up a chair beside her bed, and for the first time in years, he began to tell her stories about his time in Special Forces. Not the sanitized versions he'd shared before, but the real ones. The ones about psychological warfare, about turning an enemy's strength against them, about winning battles without throwing a single punch. "Your mother used to say that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down," he said. "They're the ones who get back up and make sure nobody else has to fall the same way." Meanwhile, at school, the atmosphere was shifting. Principal Whitmore was fielding calls from angry parents and local reporters. Savannah's family was in damage control mode, their lawyer already crafting statements about teenage mistakes and overreactions. But the video had done something none of them expected. It had given a voice to every student who had ever been bullied, every parent who had ever felt powerless, every teacher who had ever wanted to speak up, but felt constrained by politics. And Procedure.Ms. Yara Patel, Leila's English teacher, was one of those teachers. She had suspected the bullying for months, had seen the signs, but had been told by administration to let the kids work it out themselves. Now, watching the video that had made her stomach sick, she knew that silence was no longer an option. She sent Leila a text. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." When Leila returned to school 3 days later, everything had changed. The video had made national news. Protesters had gathered outside the school. Savannah, Chloe, and Riley were all under investigation, and the whole student body was walking on eggshells. But the most significant change was in Leila herself. She rolled through the hallways with her head up, her shoulders back, her eyes alert and assessing. When she passed groups of students, She didn't shrink away from their stares. She met them head-on, cataloging their reactions, their body language, their tells. Know your battlefield, her father had taught her. Understand your enemy better than they understand themselves. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Savannah was at her locker when Leila approached, flanked by a smaller group of supporters than usual. Many of her followers had distanced themselves since the video went viral, afraid of being associated with the controversy. "Savannah," Leila said, her voice carrying clearly through the hallway. The older girl turned, and for the first time since Leila had known her, Savannah looked uncertain. The video had cost her, not just in reputation, but in the social currency. She had spent years accumulating. "What do you want?" Savannah asked, trying to inject her usual venom into the words, but failing to hide the nervousness underneath. "I want to thank you," Leila said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "You've taught me something important about power, about how people use it, and how they lose it." Savannah's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Leila said, wheeling closer, "that you've shown everyone exactly who you are, and now they can't unsee it." She held up her phone, showing the news article that had run that morning about the incident. Savannah's face was prominently featured, identified by name, her actions described in unflattering detail. "This is what happens when you underestimate people," Leila continued. "When you assume that being quiet means being weak. When you mistake kindness for vulnerability." Around them, students were recording again. But this time, they weren't recording to mock. They were recording to witness. "You think you're so smart," Savannah said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "You think this changes anything? You're still the same pathetic. I'm not the same." Leila interrupted, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel that made several students take a step back. "You made sure of that. You pushed me down those stairs, and you know what? I'm grateful, because now I know exactly who I'm dealing with." She turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "How many of you have been afraid to speak up? How many of you have watched someone get hurt and said nothing because you didn't want to be next?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Several students nodded, their faces showing recognition and shame. "I used to think that staying quiet was the same as staying safe," Leila said. "But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect you, it just makes you complicit." She turned back to Savannah, who was standing frozen, seeming to realize for the first time that she was no longer in control of the situation. "So thank you, Savannah," Leila said. "Thank you for showing me that I don't have to be afraid anymore. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best way to fight back is to let everyone see exactly who really are." The student council meeting that Friday was standing room only. Word had spread that Leila was planning to speak during the open forum, and students, teachers, and parents packed the auditorium beyond capacity. Principal Whitmore had tried to dissuade her, offering private meetings and more appropriate channels for her concerns. But Leila had declined every alternative, insisting on her right to address the student body directly. She rolled onto the stage with the same calculated calm she had shown all week. Her father sat in the back row, his presence a silent reminder of the strength she carried. Ms. Patel sat in the front, her encouraging smile a beacon of support. "My name is Leila Tran," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. "And I'm here to talk about power." The room fell silent. "For 2 years, I've been a target in this school. I've been mocked for my disability, my accent, my appearance. I've been excluded from activities, humiliated in public, and physically assaulted. And through it all, I stayed quiet because I thought that was the right thing to do." She paused, letting her words sink in. But staying quiet isn't the right thing to do when staying quiet means other people get hurt. It's not the right thing to do when staying quiet means bullies get to keep their power. She looked directly at Savannah, who was sitting in the middle section, her face pale but defiant. Some of you watched me get pushed down those stairs. Some of you laughed. Some of you shared the video. And some of you did nothing at all. Today I want to talk about what all of those choices mean. The auditorium was so quiet that every word carried to the furthest corners. I want to talk about how we treat people who are different. How we decide who deserves respect and who doesn't. How we let fear make us cruel, and how we let cruelty become normal. She had been preparing this speech for days, working with her father to craft each sentence for maximum impact. Every word was chosen, every pause calculated, every gesture deliberate. I also want to talk about strength, real strength. Not the kind that comes from putting other people down, but the kind that comes from lifting them up. Not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from courage. She turned to address the entire auditorium. You see, what happened to me in that stairwell wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. It was about what we're willing to accept, what we're willing to ignore, and what we're willing to fight for. Her voice grew stronger, more commanding. I'm not asking for your pity. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm asking you to look around this room and see how many people have been hurt by our silence. I'm asking you to decide whether you want of the part of the problem or part of the solution. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the packed auditorium. Because here's what I've learned. Bullies only have power when we give it to them. They only win when we let them, and I'm done letting them win. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, someone in the back began to clap, then another, then another. Within moments, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding. Not just for Leila, but for every student who had ever been afraid to speak up. As the applause died down, Leila looked directly at Savannah one last time. Thank you, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. Thank you for showing me what I'm capable of when I stop being afraid. The reckoning had begun. The morning after Leila's speech, Principal Whitmore called her into the office. The woman sat behind her mahogany desk, her fingers steepled, her expression carefully neutral. That was quite a performance yesterday, Whitmore said, her voice carrying an undertone of disapproval. Very passionate. Leila sat in her wheelchair, her posture straight, her hands folded calmly in her lap. It wasn't a performance, Principal Whitmore. It was the truth. The truth can be complicated, Whitmore replied, reaching for a folder on her desk. I've been reviewing your situation, and I think we can find a way to resolve this quietly. Perhaps a transfer to another school? A fresh start might be good for everyone involved. Everyone? Leila asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Or just for you? Whitmore's smile faltered slightly. I'm trying to protect you, Leila. The media attention, the scrutiny, it's not healthy for a young person. Sometimes the best thing is to let things settle down. Let things settle down, Leila repeated, her father's tactical training kicking. She could read the woman's body language, the way her eyes darted to the window where protesters had gathered again that morning, the way her fingers tapped nervously on the desk. What you're really saying, Leila continued, is that you want me to disappear so you don't have to deal with the consequences of letting this happen for 2 years. That's not. I'm not going anywhere, Leila interrupted, her voice carrying the same steel that had filled the auditorium the day before. And I'm not staying quiet. Not anymore. She wheeled closer to the desk, her dark eyes never leaving Whitmore's face. You had a choice, Principal Whitmore. When teachers reported the bullying, when parents called with concerns, when students came to you for help, you chose to protect the bullies because their parents donate money to this school. You chose to ignore the victims because we were inconvenient. Whitmore's face flushed. I've always followed proper protocol. Your protocol failed, Leila said simply, and now the whole world knows it. She pulled out her phone, showing Whitmore the petition that had been circulating since her speech. Over 3,000 signatures demanding a complete overhaul of the school's anti-bullying policies. "This isn't going away," Leila said, "and neither am I." Meanwhile, across town, Riley Torres sat in his bedroom, staring at a letter he'd been writing and rewriting for hours. His hands shook as he picked up his pen one more time. To the Cypress Ridge High School community. "My name is Leila Torres, and I was one of the students who hurt Leila Tran. I want to explain what happened, not to excuse my actions, but to take responsibility for them. I was afraid. I was afraid of being the next target, afraid of losing my social status, afraid of standing up to someone who seemed more powerful than me. So I chose to hurt someone else instead of facing my own cowardice. I've watched the video of what we did to Leila dozens of times. I've seen my own face in that hallway, seen the moment I could have chosen differently. I didn't just fail to help her, I actively participated in her humiliation. I can't take back what I did, but I can make sure it never happens again." He signed his name at the bottom, folded the letter carefully, and walked to his car. It was time to deliver it to the school newspaper. In the Tran family's garage, converted into a training space years ago, Marcus watched his daughter practice her breathing exercises. Punching bags hung from the ceiling, weights lined the walls, and in the corner sat a desk where Leila had been working on her speech for the upcoming school-wide assembly. "You're ready," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had seen real combat. "But remember, this isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves." Leila nodded, her hand steady as she reviewed her notes. "I know, Dad. This isn't about revenge." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's about justice. There's a difference." He pulled up a chair beside her, his expression serious. "When I was deployed, we had a saying, 'The enemy gets a vote.' It means that no matter how well you prepare, they're going to try to disrupt your plans. What will you do if they interrupt your speech? If they try to discredit you? If they attempt to turn the audience against you?" Leila had been thinking about this for days. "I stay calm. I stick to the facts. I don't let them make me react emotionally." "Good," Marcus said. "And if they try to make you angry?" "I use their tactics against them," Leila replied, remembering the lessons he'd taught her about psychological warfare. "I let them show everyone exactly who they are." Marcus smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "You've learned well, daughter. But remember, the goal isn't to win. It's to create change that lasts." Across town, Tyrell Hayes was helping Leila prepare in a different way. The quiet boy with the speech impediment had become an unexpected ally, his keen intelligence and research skills proving invaluable in documenting the school's pattern of ignoring bullying incidents. "I found 17 formal complaints filed in the past 3 years," he told Leila over the phone. "All of them dismissed or ignored, including 3 involving physical assault." 17, Leila repeated, her voice grim. 17 students who tried to get help and were turned away. "There's more," Tyrell said. "I talked to some of the students who filed those complaints. They want to speak at the assembly too. They want to tell their stories." For the first time in days, Leila smiled. "Then we're not just changing my story, Tyrell. We're changing all of their stories." Meanwhile, Chloe Vance was discovering that actions had consequences. The video she'd thought would make her popular had instead made her a pariah. Students who had once laughed at her jokes now avoided her in the hallways. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. College recruiters had stopped calling. She sat in her car after school, crying as she watched Leila's speech from the student council meeting for the 100th time. The words hit differently now, stripped of the defensive anger she'd felt the first time she'd heard them. "Some of you watched me get pushed down those stairs. Some of you laughed. Some of you shared the video. And some of you did nothing at all." Chloe realized with horror that she had done all of those things. She had watched, laughed, shared, and done nothing to help. She had been complicit in every possible way. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "We need to talk when you get home. The school board wants to meet with us tomorrow." Chloe closed her eyes, finally understanding the weight of her choices. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Local news crews had set up cameras in the back. Parents filled the aisles. Students sat on the floor when the seats ran out. The energy in the room was electric, charged with the anticipation of something momentous. Principal Whitmore took the stage first, her prepared remarks sounding hollow in the face of the crowd's expectant silence. She spoke about learning opportunities and moving forward together, but her words felt scripted, disconnected from the reality of what had brought them all here. Then Leila rolled onto the stage. The silence that fell was complete and immediate. Every eye in the auditorium was fixed on the young woman who had transformed from victim to leader in a matter of weeks. "My name is Leila Tran," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone, "and I'm here to talk about courage." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the packed auditorium. "Not my courage, though. I've found some of that recently. I'm here to talk about the courage of every student who has ever been afraid to speak up. The courage of parents who demanded answers when their children were hurt. The courage of teachers who finally decided to break their silence." She gestured to the section where Miss Patel sat with several other faculty members. "But mostly, I'm here to talk about what happens when we stop being afraid of the truth." She pulled out her phone, holding it up so the cameras could see. "This device recorded my assault. It captured the laughter of my attackers. It preserved the evidence of a culture that had forgotten how to protect its most vulnerable members." The auditorium was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. But this same device also carried my voice beyond these walls. It showed the world what happens when we choose silence over justice. And it proved that sometimes the best way to fight back is to let everyone see exactly what you're fighting against. She looked directly at Savannah, who was sitting in the front row, her face pale but defiant. "Savannah Knox, Chloe Vance, Riley Torres, you taught me something important about power. You taught me that it's not about how loud you can shout or how much pain you can inflict. Real power is about how many people you can lift up, not how many you can tear down." Riley Torres suddenly stood up in the middle of the auditorium. His voice shook as he addressed the crowd. "She's right," he said, his words carrying clearly through the microphone someone handed him. "I was a coward. I hurt someone because I was afraid of being hurt myself. I chose to be a bully because I thought it would make me strong." He looked at Leila, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I want everyone to know that what we did was wrong. There's no excuse for it." The auditorium erupted in murmurs, but Leila held up her hand for silence. "Thank you, Rayleigh," she said. "That took courage, real courage." She turned back to the crowd. "This is what change looks like. Not perfect people making perfect choices, but imperfect people choosing to be better." At the back of the auditorium, Chloe Vance was crying uncontrollably. She stood up, her voice barely audible through her tears. "I'm sorry too," she whispered. But the microphone picked up her words. "I recorded it. I shared it. I thought it was funny. I was wrong. I was so wrong." She ran from the auditorium, unable to bear the weight of her shame any longer. Leila watched her go, her expression compassionate but firm. "Change is hard," she said. "It requires us to look at ourselves honestly, to acknowledge our failures, and to commit to doing better." She turned to Principal Whitmore, who was standing off to the side, her face ashen. "Principal Whitmore, you had opportunities to stop this. Teachers reported concerns. Parents called with questions. Students came to you for help. You chose to protect the institution instead of protecting the students." The crowd rumbled with approval. "But you also have an opportunity now," Leila continued. "You can choose to be part of the solution. You can choose to create systems that protect all students, not just the ones whose parents donate money to the school. She faced the crowd one final time. I'm not the same person who got pushed down those stairs. I'm stronger now. I'm braver. I'm more determined to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes. The weeks following the assembly were a whirlwind of change. Principal Whitmore announced her resignation, citing personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. The school board implemented a comprehensive anti-bullying program. Local news coverage sparked similar conversations in schools across the district. Savannah's family had pulled her out of Cypress Ridge High, enrolling her in a private school across town. But the damage to her reputation was permanent. College recruiters who had once courted her now avoided her calls. Her social media accounts were ghost towns. Riley Torres had started attending therapy and joined a peer support group for students dealing with guilt and shame. He spent his afternoons volunteering at a local community center, working with younger kids who had been bullied. Chloe Vance had issued a public apology video, tearfully admitting her role in the assault and pledging to do better. She was seeing a counselor and had started a social media campaign against cyberbullying. But the most significant change was in Leila herself. She rolled through the hallways of Cypress Ridge High with confidence now, her head held high, her voice strong and culture clear. Students who had once ignored her now sought her out for advice. Teachers who had once overlooked her now recognized her as a leader. Ms. Patel had become more than a teacher, she was a mentor and friend. Together, they had established a student advocacy group that met weekly to discuss concerns and propose solutions. You did something incredible, Ms. Patel told Leila one afternoon as they reviewed applications for the advocacy group. You turned your pain into purpose. I had good teachers, Leila replied, thinking of her father's lessons about strength and strategy. And I learned that sometimes the best way to heal is to help others heal too. Marcus watched from the doorway of the classroom, pride evident in his eyes. His daughter had found her mission, her purpose, her calling. She was no longer just his little girl, she was a warrior for justice, a protector of the vulnerable, a voice for the voiceless. But he also knew that the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Leila stood before a group of incoming freshmen at Cypress Ridge High's orientation assembly. The auditorium was filled with nervous 14-year-olds, their parents, and teachers who were still adjusting to the new culture that had emerged from the events of the previous year. Welcome to Cypress Ridge High, Leila began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak. I'm here to tell you about strength. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the young faces in the audience. My name is Leila Tran, and last year I was pushed down a flight of stairs by students who thought my disability made me weak. They were wrong. The auditorium was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than she had experienced before. This wasn't the silence of fear or discomfort. It was the silence of respect and attention. I'm not going to tell you that high school will be easy, she continued. I'm not going to pretend that there won't be challenges, conflicts, or moments when you feel like giving up. But I am going to tell you that you are stronger than you know. She gestured to the section where Riley Torres sat with a group of peer mentors. Strength isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and choosing to do better. It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. It's about using your voice to lift others up, not tear them down. She looked directly at the freshmen, seeing herself in their nervous faces. Some of you will face bullies. Some of you will be tempted to become bullies. Some of you will be bystanders who have to choose between safety and justice. In those moments, remember this. Real strength isn't about how much power you have over others. It's about how you use whatever power you have to make things better. She pointed to a banner that hung above the stage, a new addition to the school's decorations. It read, Cypress Ridge High, where every voice matters. This school is different now because people chose to be different. Because students chose courage over comfort. Because teachers chose truth over silence. Because parents chose accountability over convenience. She smiled, the expression transforming. Her face from serious to radiant. But the most important change didn't happen in this building. It happened in people's hearts. And that's the kind of change that lasts. In the back of the auditorium, Marcus Tran watched his daughter with tears in his eyes. She had become everything he had hoped for, and more, not just a survivor, but a leader, a protector, a force for good in the world. You have a choice, Leila concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. You can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. You can choose to be a bully or a protector. You can choose silence or courage. She straightened in her wheelchair, her shoulders back, her chin raised. I choose courage. I choose protection. I choose to use my voice to make sure that no one else has to go through what I went through alone. The applause was thunderous, but Leila barely heard it. She was thinking about her father's words from that first day of training. Strength is not about how loud you are. It's about how well you protect others when they can't protect themselves. She had found her strength. She had found her voice. And she had used both to create something lasting, a legacy of courage that would outlive any individual act of cruelty. As the freshmen filed out of the auditorium, many of them stopped to thank her, to shake her hand, to tell her their own stories of fear and hope. She listened to each one, offering encouragement and practical advice, remembering what it felt like to be afraid and alone. But she wasn't afraid anymore. And she was determined to make sure that none of them had to be afraid either. The bullies had made a mistake when they underestimated her. They had seen her wheelchair and assumed weakness. They had heard her accent and assumed vulnerability. They had mistaken her kindness for fragility. They had been wrong about everything. And now, the entire school was different because of that mistake. Students who had once been silent now spoke up. Teachers who had once looked away now intervened. Parents who had once been passive now demanded accountability. Leila Tran had not just survived her bullies, she had transformed them. And in doing so had transformed herself and her entire community. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but reformation. Not destruction, but construction. Not just surviving, but thriving. Her father's training had taught her to be strong. Her experiences had taught her to be brave. But her choice to use that strength and bravery to protect others, that was what made her truly powerful. And that power would last long after the hallways of Cypress Ridge High had forgotten the names of her tormentors. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.